This day in sports history.
Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
Hey, and welcome to another edition of This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. It's October 15th, and on this day in 1988, Jack Buck couldn't believe what he saw happen right in front of him, and most of us couldn't believe it either. The Oakland A's were favored to win the 1988 World Series. They had a near-murderer's row of young hitters, such as Jose Canseco, who had just become the first 40-home run, 40-stolen base guy in Major League Baseball history, and he would be named MVP of the American League in a few weeks. Fellow Bash brother Mark McGwire had a bit of an off year with just 32 home runs in '88, but he had led the league in homers in '87 and, of course, would eventually go on to set a new single-season record for homers a decade later. As a team, the Dodgers didn't figure in the top 5 of any offensive category except for team batting average, which they were 5th in the National League. Kirk Gibson led the team with 25 home runs that season, and he would be named National League MVP in a few weeks. But Gibson was listed as day-to-day coming into this series, and he didn't start Game 1 due to a hamstring injury he had suffered in the NLCS, along with a swollen knee and ligament damage. He could barely even walk around. LA had solid pitching, though, with soon-to-be Cy Young Award winner Oral Hershiser, and maybe that could keep the Oakland Bats at bay, but many assumed that the A's would simply overpower the Dodgers, and a 4-game sweep was not really out of the question. Oh, and the A's had the best closer in the game at that point in Dennis Eckersley. He'd led the American League with 45 saves, and he would finish second in the American League Cy Young balloting. In essence, if the A's had a lead in the bottom of the ninth, it was going to be lights out. On this day, it was Game 1 of the '88 World Series, and maybe the tone for this one and what would eventually happen in this game was set in the first inning with an unlikely home run by Mickey Hatcher, the man who was replacing the injured Kirk Gibson in the lineup. With a man on in the bottom half of the first, Hatcher, a man making his first plate appearance in the World Series ever, and who'd hit just one home run all season long, unloaded on a Dave Stewart fastball and parked it in the left field seats to make it 2-0 Dodgers. He became just the 17th player to homer in his first World Series at-bat. Canseco would erase that advantage in the second with a grand slam to make it 4-2 A's. The Dodgers added a run in the sixth to make it 4-3, and it stayed that way into the bottom of the ninth. Stewart was replaced on the mound by Eckersley, who got the first 2 batters out. Mike Davis came to the plate, and Lasorda sent Dave Anderson to the on-deck circle. Davis had hit Eckersley pretty well in the past, so he kind of pitched around him a bit, feeling that a walk would probably not hurt them, especially with a weak-hitting Anderson coming up after him. Technically, you don't want to put the tying run on, but with 2 outs and a guy who'd hit just 2 homers all season on deck, the odds were against, and so Davis took ball 4 and he trotted to first. But Anderson was a bit of a ruse. Kirk Gibson had been swinging a bat and hitting off a tee in the Dodger locker room. Lasorda had watched him take a few cuts, and he felt that it was worth a shot. So he pulled Anderson, and he sent Gibson to the plate. Down a run with a man on and 2 outs. Just to reiterate, Gibson's right knee had ligament damage and was badly swollen, and it caused him immense pain. His left hamstring was also on fire, so walking, let alone running, was simply painful. Well, here's the legendary call by Jack Buck that night.
We have a big 3-2 pitch coming here from Eckersley. Gibson swings and a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable! A home run for Gibson. And the Dodgers have won the game 5-4. I don't believe what I just saw. I don't believe what I just saw. Is this really happening, Bill?
It is happening, and they've got to help him home. The third base coach, Joe Malfitano, had to give him a little push, and all the Dodgers are around home plate.
I don't believe what I just saw. One of the most remarkable finishes to any World Series game. A one-handed home run by Kirk Gibson, and the Dodgers have won it 5-4.
So, a couple of more things to know about this game and that play. That was the first home run that Eckersley had given up in nearly 2 months. According to BaseballReference.com, the chance for a Dodger win in that situation was about 4%. It was the only appearance by Gibson in the series. The Dodgers would also win games 2, 4, and 5 to beat the Athletics 4-1 and win the championship. On this night in 1989, Wayne Gretzky became the all-time point scorer in the NHL, passing Gordie Howe. The Los Angeles Kings were on the road, playing at Edmonton, where Gretzky had spent the first 9 years of his NHL career and had led them to 4 Stanley Cup titles. This was just the second season with the Kings, but here he was on the doorstep to hockey immortality. At the start of the night, Gretzky needed only 1 point to tie and 2 to pass Howe's mark of 1,850 career points. He assisted a Bernie Nichols goal in the first period to pick up his first and tie Howe, but as time wound down in the third and the Oilers on top 4-3, it appeared that the celebration would have to wait. But the great ones always seem to have a flair for the dramatic, and at 19:07 in the third, Gretzky swept a backhander past goalie Bill Ranford to tie the game at 4, but, more importantly, giving Gretzky his 1,851st point of his career, becoming the new NHL career points leader. The game was paused several minutes to honor the moment, but Gretzky was not done for the night. With the score tied, it went to overtime, and Gretzky netted the game winner at the 3:24 mark to win the game for the Kings 5-4. Gordie had amassed his points over a 26-year career. Gretzky had passed him in just over 10. On this day in 1946, St. Louis Cardinal Enos Slaughter ran a stop sign and surprised the Boston Red Sox with his bold base running. This was Game 7 of the 1946 World Series. The game was tied at 2 in the bottom of the 8th inning. Slaughter led off with a single, but after a couple of flyouts, he was still there. He was getting a little bit antsy. The next man up was Harry Walker, who lined one to the gap in left center, and Slaughter took off at the crack of the bat. Boston center fielder Leon Culberson actually got to the ball before it could roll to the wall, and he threw it into shortstop Johnny Pesky. Well, Pesky expected to turn around and see men on first and third, but instead, he saw Slaughter streaking for home. He had blown through the hold-up sign at third and kept on chugging. Pesky's hesitation cost him precious time, and his throw to the plate was just up the line and a bit late. The Red Sox threatened in the top of the 9th, but they couldn't score, and the Cardinals were World Series champs thanks to what became known as Slaughter's Mad Dash. And let's finish off today in 1912 when the Boston Red Sox were in another World Series, but this story is not specifically about the team, but more about a group of fans called the Royal Rooters and what happened to them on this day. At the time, this group was the most famous of supporters of any major league team, and there were several well-known and prominent men amongst the group, such as Honey Fitzgerald, who was JFK's grandfather, along with well-known tavern owner Michael Nuff Said McGreevy. So this group, the Royal Rooters, traveled with the team. They cheered them loudly, they sang songs, and they gave opposing players a hard time. And another thing is that the Royal Rooters always sat together in the exact same section of seats for home games, known as Duffy's Cliff at Fenway Park. Well, on this day 112 years ago, It was Game 7 of what would become an 8-game series between the Red Sox and the New York Giants. Side note, Game 2 ended in a tie. They ran out of daylight and there weren't lights at stadiums yet, so they didn't finish Game 2, but instead of finishing it the next day, they played an additional game. However, the players were not compensated for playing an additional game in the series. In fact, their share only came from gate receipts to the first 4 games. So if you want to understand why a Black Sox scandal can happen in 1919, it was things like this that kind of added to players' discontent with ownership. I'm getting a bit off track, but I thought it was important to kind of point out since I talked about the Black Sox scandal yesterday. Okay, so back to this one. The Red Sox were 1 win away from winning the series. A ticket seller made a mistake and sold the Duffy's Cliff section of seats to some other people. And when the Royal Rooters got to the game and found out that their seats had been double sold, they rioted. The Rooters broke through the outfield fence, marched around on the field, and then bothered the players. The police were called in to restore order, which took several minutes, delaying the start of the game. The Red Sox starter, Larry Gardner, must have cooled off in the melee. He allowed 6 first-inning runs once play resumed. New York went on to win Game 7 11-4. McGreevy led a demonstration in front of the Red Sox box office and declared a boycott by the Royal Rooters for Game 8. So they missed Boston's 3-2 win, which won the 1912 World Series on the following day, but they were all seen celebrating the championship in the streets of Boston after the game. And time now for today's Got Nothing to Do with Sports Fun Fact. In 1960, future Beach Boy Brian Wilson's final project for a high school music class was supposed to be a sonata. Instead, he wrote the melody for what would later become the song Surfin'. Now, he received an F for the project. In 1961, with the lyrics added, Surfin' would go on to be the breakout song for the Beach Boys, peaking at number 75 on the Billboard Hot 100 and propel the band to stardom. But the story doesn't end there. In 2018, the high school ended up changing the grade from an F to an A. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll be back tomorrow with another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.